want to learn web development, where is that to even start? If you Google it online, you'll see thousands of results, some old and some just plain old misleading. Before you can even start to learn how to code, you need to understand how the web works. All websites and the most basics are just a bunch of files stored in a computer called a server. The server is connected to the internet. You can load the website through a browser then, or in this situation your browser is known as the client. There's a short summary of how the web works. There are 3 different types of web developers: front-end, back-end, and full-stack developers. A front-end developer's job is to code the actual website and make the website look nice and respond to everything. A back-end developer job is to store the data and make a way for the front-end developer to access that data. A full-stack developer is someone who works with both front-end and back-end. HTML or hypertext markup language is the main file loaded when you open your browser. The HTML file loads all different types of content and uses tags to differentiate each type of content. For example, you can use tags to create headings, subheadings, bullet point lists, numbers, and much more. HTML tags do have some very basic styles attached. It's kind of like what you'd see in a Word document. CSS or Castleling style sheets lets you add fonts, colors, and much more to your website. It allows you to design your website however you want. There are lots of things you can do with CSS, but a lot of people don't know is a lot of people skip CSS to learn JavaScript. JavaScript is a programming language designed to run on the browser. Using JavaScript, you can make your website respond to different inputs, such as a scroll back to top button, and when the user presses the button at the bottom of the page, it will scroll them to the top of your website. In addition to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, there are some other tools you'll need to learn. Package managers are one of the biggest things you'll need to learn. Package managers are an online collection of software, each piece called a package, usually open source. These packages are available for you to install and use in your own projects. You can think of these like plugins. Instead of having to reinvent the wheel for someone else has already coded, you can install a package and get up and running in minutes, other than spending 2 days, 4 days, weeks even, trying to recode something someone else has already coded. The 2 most popular package managers are NPM and Yarn. The most common package manager is NPM, and I would recommend learning NPM first as it's the most commonly used package manager. In addition to learning package managers, you'll need to learn build tools. Build tools on a basic level lets you run tasks and process files. For example, when working on a front end, you're going to want to see your changes live. You're going to be using a package called BrowserSync in order to see your changes happen live on your web browser. The last tool which you're going to need to learn is Git. Git allows you to commit changes to your local repo in your computer. Using Git, you can also make branches with separate features. For example, you can have one branch for the header, one branch for the footer, and combine them all to the master branch, which is the main branch at the end of the project. You may have heard of GitHub. GitHub is a website online to host your Git repositories for the world to see. Normally when working as a developer, you'll be using Git/GitHub to store thousands and thousands of lines of code. At this point, you've learned basic front-end development and have the choice whether to learn additional front-end or basic back-end. If you decide to do additional front-end, I'd recommend learning Sass, JavaScript frameworks, and responsive design. Sass is an extension of CSS that allows you to write your styles more modular and faster than writing with plain old CSS. With Sass, you can organize your styles into separate files, variables, and much more. Using Sass, you can write your styles a lot faster than with plain old CSS, and it will give you less of a headache even if you don't take advantage of all of Sass's features. Responsive design is short and ensures that your website looks good on all devices from phones, tablet, laptops, desktops, and all devices in between. The cool way of doing responsive design is by including flexible sizing for elements, as well as using media queries to target styles for specific screen sizes. Building a website with responsive CSS is a must these days, considering mobile traffic is higher than desktop
Once you
traffic.
understand vanilla JavaScript, you'll want to learn one of the many JavaScript frameworks.
One of the reasons for learning JavaScript frameworks is in order to get a job, most jobs will require you to know at least some JavaScript frameworks. The top 3 most popular JavaScript frameworks are React, Vue, and Angular. You'll need to have knowledge of basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in order to start learning JavaScript frameworks, which is why we learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before we even start looking into JavaScript frameworks. JavaScript frameworks have many features over regular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which I'm not going to get into now. If you can't decide which framework to learn, I'd recommend searching up which framework is the most popular in your area for job. The backend is made out of 3 main components: the server, a server-side programming language, and a database. As we mentioned in the beginning, a server is where all the files are stored and the database is stored. Usually a server runs on Windows or Linux. On the server, you need to use a programming language to write functions and logic for your application. Popular backend languages include PHP, Python, Ruby, C#, Java, There's also a form of server-side JavaScript known as Node.js. Finally, you'll need to learn about databases. Databases is where you store the information on your server for your website. Most databases use a language called SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language. A database is kind of formatted like a complicated Excel document. You have all these different types of columns, tables, and much more. Some examples of how databases could be used on your website. If you were to create a contact form, every time someone were to put the information into the contact form, the info would be sent to your database and be stored there. And that's how I'd recommend getting started in web development. I've left links below to help you with any of these stages you are on.